Welcome back to Core in Commerce, the show that proves success without self-care is just burnout in disguise. I'm your host, Perry Howell, wellness, media, and marketing entrepreneur. And today's guest sits right at the intersection of tech, movement, and mental health. Lino Benninga is the founder of Social Limits, the app helping people reclaim their mornings by blocking social media until you literally move your body. In under 5 months, Social Limits hit 15,000 downloads, reached users in over 100 countries, and cracked Apple's top 50 productivity apps, all built around one simple idea: move more, scroll less. With over 6 years of experience in enterprise tech and AI, Lino began asking bigger questions about attention, dopamine, and what our always-on lives are doing to our mental health. This podcast is made with real intention, from who I invite into these conversations to how they're shared with you. If you're enjoying the show, please make sure you subscribe. It's the simplest way to support the work and help it grow. Lino, welcome to Core in Commerce.
Thank you.
Are you ready to get well?
I'm very, very ready.
Lino and I have briefly met over Zoom. I would say my first impression of you was you kind of have a quiet confidence. And we love to start this pod by going a little bit back into the time machine and talking about if you always have been this way, if you resonate with what I just said at all, and kind of early signs of what you were like in your childhood. So can you kind of take us back?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. That's a great compliment, by the way. And it's lovely to meet you in person. I think it's always interesting because people try to give off as much confidence as they can. It's always nice to hear it from someone else that there is that kind of notice of it. And in terms of from a childhood, I wouldn't say I was super outgoing. I think I come from I guess you could say quite a traditional family that like to really sort of build the building blocks step by step. It's never kind of jump straight in. And so I definitely think that's resonating kind of the career I've built, what I'm building right now with Social Limits is really that perspective of, okay, put in the groundwork, do the research before jumping in, make sure kind of you're quite more analytical than anything, understanding that perspective. And then once you go into it, you know, you've done the base work, so you understand where you are and you know where to proceed from there. So that's definitely kind of how I was brought up. And I definitely see it resonating in business and my career life these days.
You have a few different things happening. One, you're a founder and an entrepreneur. 2, you're in the tech space and you actually have a bit of a technical background, which we'll get into.
Yeah.
3, I always do my research. I saw that you have a little bit of background in, movement and fitness.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us about some of your early hobbies and things that you were really turned on by growing up?
It's interesting. I'd love to understand how deep you went with that research.
LinkedIn. Okay, it's just LinkedIn.
That's cool. Yeah, absolutely. Definitely kind of a big background of being super active. I grew up in Barcelona on the beach, and it was just an incredible environment that we could go for a swim in the morning. We could, go wakeboarding. We could also go to the mountains and ski within kind of 2 hours. So definitely have that background of doing as much activity as kind of physically possible. I also played soccer, football for myself, so quite competitively at a young age. And then I surfed a lot as well, which is kind of a deep passion of mine. And so I really grew up in that environment that was a lot of exercise, as much movement as possible. We weren't really allowed electronic devices when we were younger. My parents were quite strict with that, which in hindsight, I'm quite grateful for. We weren't allowed PlayStations. We weren't allowed Xboxes. The only times I ever used those is when I went to my friend's house, etc. So they were quite strict with things like that, which I think in hindsight is really good because that taught us to get outside, experience the real world. And that's, I think, something that I'm continuously chasing these days now, definitely with what we're building.
It's really interesting because I actually had a question around your relationship with screen time in your childhood. So it's funny that you mentioned that it didn't even play a role when you were younger. And it's interesting now, of course, we'll get into some of the nuances of what you've built. Having a background in tech, there had to be some computer component. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. My dad's, I guess, he's an entrepreneur, I would say. He's always worked in technology. He was actually kind of involved in the early stages of digitalizing computers and graphics, etc. So he definitely instilled that part into me. Then I always had this passion for computers and anything tech. I was always kind of that guy that if anyone had a problem, they was like, "Oh, Lino, can you go fix it?" Whether that was my grandma, friends, or
This
whatever
is my
it was.
sister in my family, by the way. We call her tech support.
There we go. And that's what it is. And, I sort of just started to find a passion for things like that. And so I quite quickly understood that's what I wanted to do, but I didn't understand how that could apply in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, okay, so, what's the mix? And I still to this day believe there's a huge difference between the technology aspect of a business and then the business marketing. I think it's quite rare to see those two worlds connect well and communicate well. I think you have the, extremely talented technical developers, etc., that understand from an architectural perspective how a product will work. And then you have the, extremely talented business marketing side that sell the product, etc. But often those two don't communicate together the best. And if you think about it, that's really kind of the core of a business, right? You need to be able to communicate what the customers are saying to a technical team so they can build what the customers are asking for. So I would say I kind of had a bit of business acumen from just kind of my background doing a couple things, but I really wanted to kind of be able to understand from the technical perspective what that world looks like and be able to walk into a room and say, okay, I understand what's going on here. And I always knew that I was never going to be the smartest. I was never going to be the best coder. I was never going to be the most technical person. But the ability to understand it and communicate was always my goal. And that's what led me to study a degree in computer science. I definitely felt out of my comfort zone the entire 4 years that I did it. Kind of always felt like the dumbest in the room, which I think is a good thing because that's where you learn the most. And yeah, so studied that for 4 years. It really allowed me to understand technically what's going in the world. I studied most object-oriented programming, etc. And the ability to then apply that with the business acumen that now I'm sort of continuously learning was really something quite exciting. And I think that's super important in this day and age to be able to talk about it and understand what's going on and get to that kind of point.
What you've described is almost a jack of all trades, master of none. Do you resonate with that at
Yes,
all?
absolutely. Yes. And I think to some degree, a founder does have to be that, but always have. I would disagree with that saying in the sense of master of none. I think it is always important to at least have one niche that you are very good at that differentiates you, but still have that broader understanding.
I totally agree with that. I think it's almost like master of one.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes I've found, especially even in my own founder journey, you kind of have to niche down to niche up. And people are always looking to put you in a box. And it's, the one who. Correct. And even I'm guilty of doing it to you this morning of, your background is in, tech and comp sci. It's the one who. But you have other points that have obviously made you into, a successful founder and more executive qualities.
Yeah.
For someone who's growing up, they're, tinkering in tech and, some of those early comp sci passions.
Yeah.
What are some ways you might recommend that they could fine-tune some of those other soft skills, those executive skills like you mentioned?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of put yourself into as many social business situations as you can. I think no one likes to do it, but the entry-level sales jobs, I think, teach you so much. The ability to, go door knocking and speak to anyone about a product, I think is really a talent that builds so much character and the ability to communicate with people. I think communication in this day and age is so, so key. So if you can somehow put yourself out there, whether that's going, I don't know, maybe going to a friend's party that you don't know anyone and just go and meet people, put yourself out there. You feel uncomfortable because you don't know anyone and maybe there's a whole group there that all know each other. But if you can go in there with maybe only knowing one person and be comfortable with sparking up a conversation with anyone. I know maybe at a younger age that is more difficult, but especially with the stigma, etc. But that's definitely where you kind of build those characteristics from an early stage.
One of the best pieces of advice that I received when I started my business was expect rejection.
Yeah. Oh.
And what you described is kind of in those early sales roles, it's almost that. It's you're just thickening your skin over time.
For sure. And you absolutely need that in, especially building your own business. Social Limits isn't my first venture that I've worked on, but it's definitely the one that I guess is the most ambitious, but with that comes the most amount of rejection. I would say, we get couple sort of 10, 20 no's a week every week.
Yeah, what's your ratio of no's to yeses? Because I think this actually inspires a lot of people.
I wouldn't even know. I would say my yeses are probably 5% or less, if I'm honest.
I'm the same. I would say my yield is very high on the no's, but then you have those moments, especially with this podcast. I'm always asking people to come on and share their stories, and it's a vulnerable and kind of raw and honest space, so it's not for everyone. And some days you get that really amazing yes where it's like, oh my God, yes, this is the exact person that I wanted to talk to. And it's the best feeling in the world. But those are very few and far between.
Yeah. No, I would agree. And you build up a tough skin. I mean, you eventually it doesn't hurt, I guess you could say, but it still's definitely that, something that goes on a lot. And it's crazy. You kind of just have to really learn to pick yourself up and just think one no is that step closer to a yes. And I know that's quite a cliche saying, but it genuinely is very true.
Yeah, it's a numbers game at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Let's go back to the days of that first spark of inspiration for social limits.
Yeah.
What was the very first trigger where you thought, maybe a digital detox has a role in my life? You've talked a lot about your childhood and how that kind of set the stage, but there had to have been some sort of trigger point where you thought there could be something here.
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't define it as one unique trigger point. I'd define it as kind of a multitude of kind of accumulative occasions that happened. And I really just found myself on my phone for ridiculous amounts of time. And I guess to pinpoint one is probably an Instagram reel that I watched, ironically, that dictated how long you'd spend over your lifetime on your phone if you continued at the rate that you were spending. And I think mine was something ridiculous, like 15 years or something like that. But you say, that's pretty normal. If you're spending 4 hours a day on your phone, that's kind of what it adds up to.
I'm not claiming to be a digital detox saint here. I'm totally guilty as well.
Yeah. And, that kind of really clicked in my head. I was like, if I was on my deathbed, if I could get 15 years back, absolutely, I'd say yes. So, what are these small intentional changes that I can make to bring that back? And so that really started to build the journey of, okay, let's start to build something. And I tested everything. I tried other products, other blockers. I even went fully non-digital, but with a Nokia brick. I kind of went fully extreme to say, okay, I'm just going to phone people or text message, which made it quite difficult. And then came to that realization that, that's not realistic. You need a smartphone for simple things like maps or, to message people sometimes is quite useful, answering your emails on the go. And that's when we really kind of got to the stage, I got to the stage of, okay, let's do some research. Let's really understand where this problem is. And that's what tied it back to morning routines. And there's a lot of research and a lot of studies that have been done to prove that the first 30 minutes, hour of your day is the most important part in terms of your brain absorbing information. It's the freshest, right? It's been resting for 8 hours, however long you sleep. And it's ready to absorb information. If you're spending those first 10, 20 minutes scrolling on your phone, it's triggering those dopamine hits of fake, quick dopamine. And then your brain gets used to that. So the rest of the day, it's looking for that artificial dopamine. It's thinking, oh, okay, well, I had this in the morning. I can continue to chase it because that's what your brain likes, right? That's what it chases. It's a feel-good emotion. And so that's really kind of what we base it off, that if we could cut out that first morning, would it have that residual effect? And a couple studies and things we did prove that it did. So it's just that ability to block out the first couple hours of the day can make a significant change. And it is, we get messages, weekly, if not daily, from people saying, oh, I love this. I've tried so many other things, but this is the only one that's really starting to work for me, which is, extremely rewarding in itself.
I love that you started with your why, and that's the foundation of your business. It sounds like then you kind of moved into a little bit of R&D.
Yeah.
And then moved into a bit of customer testing. But can you break down a little bit more tactically of your steps in those early stages as a founder?
Yeah, absolutely. Validation, and more validation. Always. And I'll preach that because it's just, it will prevent you from wasting time. I'm not saying that you can validate it and 100% your business is going to be a success, but it will dramatically increase those odds. So what we first did, I just started talking to friends, family, anyone that would listen, and just say, hey, if this was a solution, would you try it? Would you like it? And the general interest was yes, I mean, it was extremely positive, to be honest. I don't think I met someone that said, no, I wouldn't give that a go.
No, I'd like to lose those 15 years, actually. Life has been a little tough lately. I'll just skim that off the top.
We just validated it, and I tried to build the simplest version of it. I hired the first developer, and we literally built with no user interface, no UI, just purely block. You got to take steps, and it unlocks, and gave it to a few people to test and got their feedback. And then just kind of started building those blocks that I mentioned before of that solid foundation of, okay, this works. Let's just build off that and kind of keep that key functionality and continue to kind of grow from that perspective.
So where is Social Limits today?
Yeah, good question. We actually hit 145th most downloaded productivity app globally the other day, which is pretty cool.
That's insane.
I have about over 1,000 active daily users now that use it consistently. And we just have, just the ability to connect with this huge audience that we've kind of built just naturally and organically around it, of people so passionate about getting offline and getting more movement. And it's unique to the sense of it's not just people that want to get offline, it's people that want to get offline and they want to get moving, which is kind of the two worlds that collide together.
I've always found that to be a really unique value prop of what you've built, because oftentimes it's like the calm and the headspace that fall into the mental health bucket.
Correct.
Or, the Stravas of the world that fall into the movement bucket. And I love that you've blended those two things. That's a personal passion point of mine. And in the business that I've built is really like movement is just as essential to your mental health, and your mental health is just as essential to your movement. These two things are married. They go hand in hand. Can you share maybe a customer anecdote of, someone who's used the app and its impact on just even their day-to-day?
I actually got a message yesterday of someone. They said they had tried so many different apps and they couldn't really kind of seem to shake the ability to get on their phone. And they said just that simple habit of being able to replace it with something is what allowed them to have that impact. And what we base the app off is the addiction to nicotine and smoking. And there's an interesting story of addicted nicotine smoker who really tried everything to kick the habit, and he couldn't. And it's a story of he would smoke at least a pack a day. And so what he did is he just got rid of his cigarettes and tried to kind of quit stone cold. Then he found himself on his way to work. He'd go past the gas station, buy a pack of cigarettes, and then just smoke in the car on his way to work. Then when he said, okay, well, I'll just smoke in the car because that will make me smoke less. So he bought a pack of cigarettes, left it only in the car, and only smoked in the car. What he quite quickly realized that you just sit in the car for hours and smoking just because you had that addiction. What he really tried to do is understand, and he spoke to someone to understand how to kick the habit. And what he did is, because he always had a pack of cigarettes in his in the side of the car, in the drawer, he replaced that with something, because he realized that the habit was from actually picking it up, just sitting in the car and just putting his hand in and then picking up the cigarette. He didn't even realize he was smoking. He replaced it with a fidget spinner, and he found himself that actually sitting in the car, he'd just pick up his fidget spinner and play with it. And that was something to do. So that distracted his brain from the need to smoke cigarettes. And he really, that was basically a game changer. That allowed him to stop smoking. He still smoked occasionally, but it was way, way less because he found another distraction that was much healthier than smoking. And so that's what we essentially base Social Limits off is, okay, if you're quitting your phone, you're spending less time on your phone, how can you replace that with a positive habit? What's an extremely positive habit? Movement, steps. There's so many studies and research that's been done to show how beneficial just moving your body is. I mean, I speak to physios and all the time, and even doctors, and they're like, yeah, often the solutions, okay, not to be too generalistic, but often the solution is just telling the people to get more movement in. It has so many benefits to it. And that's really what we based it off, and we've seen great success, which is awesome.
Have you read Atomic Habits?
I have.
Okay, so we've talked about it on the pod before, but I think this theme comes up a lot about healthy habit forming and just making your life easier. And I think you just touched on a big piece of, I would say, a key takeaway of Atomic Habits, which is the more you can just make healthy habits right in front of your face and just on the nose, the healthier. And if you want this to be the year that you run a marathon, keep your running shoes by the front door. It's that simple because even that small thing of having to dig into the back of your closet, find a running outfit, it creates an impediment that's not serving you.
I was actually finishing a book recently, which you recommended. It was Dopamine Nation, which really talks about that ability to kick a habit and to feel those changes of addiction post kind of, getting rid of it can take up to 4 weeks. And it's just that cycle of the first and second week are probably the most difficult because your brain is still used to that habit. So once you get to the third, fourth, only after the fourth week sometimes, do you start to kind of feel that change and build a new habit that you're starting to form.
I'm so impressed that you guys have been able to scale globally. And I am similar to you. I've moved over to Australia from the US. You've moved from the UK. What have you noticed in terms of maybe some macro cultural differences as you've been trying to talk about mental health and movement and, some areas that you think are totally catching on and it's felt totally organic of, these people are really into wellness versus maybe some stickier regions where you've noticed that culturally they're a bit behind in conversations around mental health and movement?
It's an interesting question. I think Australia is the epitome of kind of, Sydney, at least, Bondi is the epitome of fitness, movement, everything. So I think starting it here is probably a perfect coincidence. And so, there's definitely just that lifestyle of getting up early, etc. I would say, and, not to speak too much financially to it, but the Australian market is a tough market financially from people willing to spend their hard-earned money, basically. By far the best market in the world is the US. People just have more, it's a more consumer mindset. They just have that willingness to spend, where Australia is not as much, and less than the UK and the EU, I would say, because we track all those metrics. And so that's definitely, a big learning. It all goes back to your customer acquisition of a user and then getting it through to, a paying customer or consumer. In Australia, those numbers are way lower than basically anywhere else globally that we've tested. And we operate now in 88 countries.
Are you guys freemium or is it all a paid subscription?
Yeah, so it is a freemium model, but we have really leaned towards not really advertising the freemium. So we still want people to have access if they want to. For free, but it's not necessarily advertised and it's quite limited. I did a lot of studies to understand, what are you going to increase your conversion rates the most? And a lot of them just proved that having a hard paywall and just making the user decide is what's going to convert them. And and this really kind of dives more into the psychology of it. It's so interesting understanding those first 60 seconds that you get a user onto your app, what their thinking process is, and what's going to increase that likelihood of them actually committing to your app and using it. And so basically our onboarding triggers emotion and it's long enough to get the user engaged, but not too long where they get bored and click away. So what that means is once they get to the paywall, they've engaged enough in it. They've kind of committed some of their time, even if it's a minute or 2 minutes, it's nothing, but they feel like they've done something for this. So they're less likely to click away. When you show them the paywall, they're more likely to convert. We noticed that we did a couple things which extended the onboarding, which then decreased because people just didn't even get to the end. And then the emotion part is super important. And it's actually based off what I basically inspired me to create the app, which was that figure of 15 years of my life. So when you first install the app, we ask you a few questions and we will calculate how long you're going to spend over your lifetime on your phone. And that's that kind of emotional impact of, I'm going to spend, 16 years of my life if I continue in this direction. And so that's super interesting. I think that whole data analytics perspective I love that. I think that's so cool to understand.
I have a really interesting anecdote for you. So I was formerly head of brand at Tinder, and onboarding was a big piece of how we positioned ourselves because at Tinder, you can set up a profile in about 10 seconds or less. You pop up a few photos, you put your first name, not even your last, and your region, and that's really it. And what we found through Hinge was also in the portfolio. Hinge takes you about 10 to 15 minutes. You show your friends, you're at the pub, you're like, is this photo good enough? You work on your prompts. And that intentionality around the onboarding on Hinge led the very same person to behave differently on Tinder as they would on Hinge. So on Tinder, they would be there for, a one-night stand, a hookup. That's how it got that kind of brand perception. And on Hinge, they would be, swiping on the same people, the very same person, but they would be looking for something more intentional and more serious. And you've totally tapped that with what you just described of your trial and error with your onboarding, which is if you can kind of evoke some sort of intentionality in the onboarding process, you've already triggered a different response in how people behave and how they probably perceive value of what you've created.
Correct. Yeah. And they start to kind of realize this, and that's when they, hopefully show then the intention of converting into a paying user or at least a trial. And then you can start to kind of, make sure either their user experience is exceptional or they're getting exceptional value out of it to then keep them as kind of, not a lifelong customer, but a customer with a decent duration, for sure.
For someone who's maybe a bit intimidated by, I'm going to do, a 60-day challenge where every single day I start my day phone free. Myself included. What would you say is a good way to dip their toes in the water of just feeling a little bit of refresh? Maybe it's, on Wednesday mornings they try this out, but what do you recommend?
Yeah, I love that question. So this is actually something that we're at Social Limits thinking about quite intensely now, is understanding what is the best way to inflict change. So currently what we have is the ability, it's pretty standard. You restrict your access to socials in the morning until you take steps. You won't get access. But we're thinking now to really build these predetermined, I guess you can call them plans for someone to experience depending on their unique situation. A perfect example of this is Runner, the running app. They've done so well at understanding, okay, Perry, you want to run half a marathon in 6 months. What does that plan look like for you? And they build you a completely custom plan to understand, okay, first week, just run 5Ks or, whatever it may be. And so we're really kind of pivoting to understand, okay, if we can get just a bit more information from a user and understand what they're really trying to achieve, then we can build them out customized plans for the duration of a month, 6 months, a year, whatever it is, to minimize their screen time and increase their step count at once. So I don't have an answer for you yet with that. That's something we're currently understanding. And, we'll use all the incredible data points and AI tools that we can these days to further understand that from a user, to be able to give that exceptional experience of, okay, Perry, we can pretty much commit to you, if not give you a refund, that in the next 6 months, you're going to decrease your screen time by 2 hours a day or 3 hours a day, whatever that is, which equivalates to 10 years of your life. I think that's going to be really cool. And that's also going to pivot how we start to go to market.
I love that you're thinking that way. And I think personalization is going to be a game changer as well. We love to go deep on the founder experience because it is very burnout prone. And, I actually asked you in our first conversation, do you practice what you preach? And you were like, no, I actually do. But beyond, social limits, can you talk a little bit about what a day in your life looks like and how you are mindfully trying to prevent burnout and, increase balance in your life?
Yeah, it's, I think you have to just almost come to the decision that you're going to have to sacrifice a certain amount of time and period of your life. I think it's important to really address burnout. I will religiously every single day try and get outside, whether that's going for a walk, even if it's a walk around the block, just simple things to clear your head. That really helps me personally. 'Cause even if it's when I'm coming home from the city, I get off at, maybe a bus stop earlier just to get a couple more steps in.
I love that.
Just those tiny little intentional things allow you to have 20 minutes without your phone and, disconnected. I don't put AirPods in because that's just another distraction. I love listening to podcasts, don't get me wrong, and I love watching
Core
things.
and commerce being your favorite, of course.
Of course, top of the list. But that ability to just have your thoughts and just sit with your thoughts. Boredom is the most underrated, pleasure in my life currently. Just that ability to sit with your thoughts, and it's amazing how creative you can get, because the problem is the digital simulation these days. Any minute you've got free, you'll pick up your phone and you'll go through it, so you very rarely sit with your thoughts, and so I think that ability is really quite special. So I really try and do that as regularly as I can to try and prevent that burnout. But realistically, when you're first starting and building, it's going to be tough, and it's long days, long hours, but it's it's part of the job, I guess.
I think it's Bill Gates who is famous for the 1 week out of the year he just goes to a private island and goes totally unplugged.
Oh, I'd love to do that.
Yeah, right. We would all love to do that. But I think the lesson there is kind of what you described, is finding quiet moments to
Correct.
actually think and be creative and be iterative, because we spend so much of our time doing. There's not a lot of time for strategic thinking in that. So what I'm gleaning is even just finding little pockets every day to, for lack of a better word, unplug.
Yeah, and even at lunchtime, you sit there, eat your food, and just eat your food and concentrate on just being present. Don't have a screen in front of you. Don't watch YouTube. Don't do that. Just sit there. And even if it's a 15-minute lunch, it's quite interesting that your thoughts start and sometimes some of my best ideas come from just sitting with my thoughts, and it's not sitting in an office thinking about an idea. It's going for a walk, getting outside, doing something where I'm just kind of, not presently actively thinking about something. It's just naturally happening.
So this is a bit of a meatier question, but something that I've observed just as a generalization is that women tend to be really great about talking about our mental health and what's going on in our lives. And, oh my gosh, my therapist said that I have to try XYZ. And I think it comes a little bit less naturally to men.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you've thought about that at all as you're building social limits and as you're building a space to talk about better balancing your mental health, if you've, put any more rigor around getting men, to actually have these conversations. And even what you just described is like sitting at lunch with one of your guy friends and being like, how are you doing really?
For sure. I haven't given that much thought, to be honest. What we did is we hosted our first in-person event, I think it was a week ago now, and people just came together and went for a walk. And it was quite interesting because it wasn't, I think, run clubs are everywhere and they're great, but ours was a walk event where you just walked. We walked from Bondi to Tama, if anyone knows that route. And a lot of people really enjoyed it, and a couple of men that came that never met before. They were just users of the app. And it gave that ability to talk with someone in a very informal setting where you're just walking next to each other, and the conversation just flows. And I felt like it really allowed me and others, from what I heard, is the ability to just kind of really communicate and have that time. You're not running where you're out of breath. You're just walking, and it's first thing in the morning, so your brain's the healthiest. And so just that ability to communicate. And I would definitely encourage that more and more. We want to start doing events and just more things around movement. One idea I had was men doing Pilates, for example.
Step into my office, Lino.
Yeah, it's great. I'm injured at the moment, so I can't go to the gym or anything. Pilates is the only thing I can do. I love it. I've done about 5-6 classes, and it's great. It's kind of very different to what I'm used to, but just experiencing things like that, and for men to be comfortable to do that, I think is super interesting.
I think you've actually nailed it with the Pilates example, because it's just a softer, and even walking, these are just softer modes of interaction, whereas running or lifting, you're still in that, macho frame of mind where it's very, full on. And I think being able to slow down, and I also, moving to Australia, I've observed it's pretty much exclusively the pub is the third space that men, interact in. That I love that you're encouraging just like walking, grabbing a coffee, easy mornings with your guy friends.
Correct. And not to say that, I still am a huge fan of intense fitness, I guess you could call it, going to the gym or doing, going for a run, etc. But I think the mix of both is the beautiful thing about it. If you can go for a walk in the morning or the evening and then do your run in the morning or evening, whichever it is, it's still amazing, because walking, you still get your steps in. And they've said that and they've proven actually that whether you get your steps in walking, whether you get your steps in running, they're still steps. It's the same thing. You're going the same distance, same amount of steps. So it doesn't matter. You can do those things that are kind of less intensive on your body as long as you're getting moving. To be honest, I'd encourage over 10,000 steps a day. I think that is realistic, but but still a tough challenge to do.
What is that in time? Is that like an hour a day?
I'd say a bit longer.
Okay.
Yeah, but just don't think that you've got to go for a walk for 10,000 steps. You can embed it into your lifestyle. As I said, walk to the next bus stop, or if you're working a corporate job in the city, maybe get off a train station sooner, or just small things like that, and just take that extra step can have huge impact.
I love the getting off the train stop or the bus stop one station sooner, because that takes 0% out of your day. It adds no time, but it also adds a total serotonin boost to your
Correct.
day.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to implement that. Lino, we're going to move into some rapid fire. So
Yeah.
this is more, first thing that comes to your brain.
Yeah.
Something in the UK that Australia has not adopted yet that you think they need to.
Oh, sure. I really, really enjoy Australia. There's so many things. I mean, I could give you 20 that are Australia into the UK.
Okay, let's do that one.
Sure.
Okay, so in reverse, we're going to do something in the Australian market that you think the UK needs to adopt.
Market or lifestyle?
Could be anything. Lifestyle. It could be your favorite place to get a burrito.
I'd encourage being more social in the mornings. I love going for a coffee before work and, interacting with people before your day starts. Agree, there's the UK lighter later and the weather isn't as good, and it's also bigger to get places and, you work within your barriers, but learning to just meet up with friends in the morning, go for a coffee, or, we can go for a swim here, is so refreshing because it's just something so rewarding before you even start your job. And you just start your job on a much more positive note. You feel so accomplished before 9 a.m. And so, within balance, I still like to go out and etc. But definitely that morning culture is something that hopefully could be adopted more in the UK.
I would say the exact same answer. I think it hits you over the head when you move, especially to Sydney.
Yeah.
Of this cultural difference.
Sure.
I came from both New York and LA, and for different reasons, there's no morning culture to be had. LA, you're sitting in traffic in your car.
Yeah.
New York, you're hustling and getting to your day job. But here, it's like this really intentional thing that you're almost the outcast if you're not engaging in morning social activity, which I love. What is your favorite piece of advice that you've gotten in your founder journey?
Every no is just getting you closer to a yes. We got rejected by Apple 16 times. 16, 16 before we could go and be published on the App Store. And I got to the 14th, 15th, and I was thinking, this is never going to happen, because we're trying to restrict Instagram, TikTok, the big guys. Why is Apple going to support us over them? And, eventually we did Justify and we got it through. But yeah, it's just keep going, and it's not as pretty as what it seems sometimes building something. It's a lot of late nights, a lot of hard work that you don't really see the reward. And often you go through this period of, I was actually just listening to a podcast Alex Hormozy was on, of understanding it's a bit of a graph that goes up and then down. And then when you first start building a business, you have all that excitement, you have all that support from people, and you kind of get a couple months in or couple weeks in, and maybe you've got a first prototype or something, and all that excitement is there. And then that quite quickly starts to dip off because you don't, maybe you don't get users, or maybe you don't get traction as much as, very, very rarely will a business just skyrocket immediately. And then you kind of get down that slope of, okay, well, my friends aren't really supporting me that much anymore. They're not really asking me about it because I've been doing it for 6 months. I don't really have that many users. I'm not making any money. And you start to question yourself as, okay, well, actually, am I doing the right thing? So it's so important to just really believe in what you're doing. Don't do something because you think you're going to make money out of it or something like that, doing it for the wrong reasons. Just do something that you generally believe is either going to help people or is going to have a positive impact, or you're just passionate about, because that will get you through those low moments. And there's a lot of them. And if you can just push through and keep going, there's always another uphill after that.
It goes back to where you started, which is you're rooted in your why, and
Correct.
You genuinely believe in the mission behind it. And I think that can help you through some of those lower points, is like you're so clear on your why. And I think that's a really incredible place to start.
Yeah. And you always get support at the beginning, at the end, but when you most need it is the middle. And if you don't get it, that's when you don't get it. So you need a why to help you go through that. It's like running a marathon or a race. You'll get people at the start, you'll get people at the end. So it's just really understanding that and coming to terms with it, to be honest, because that will then help you get through it.
So looking ahead, I'm going to bring us home, 2026. What's upcoming for Social Limits for you? Where is your focus?
Yeah, that's a great question. We just announced this amazing partnership and collaboration with Hoka, the shoe brand. And so we're really looking at doing more things like that, is, leveraging these existing brands to encourage more movement, encourage less screen time, and start to go into those aspects of, okay, if it's a fitness wear or even gyms. I think gyms is a great example of, you're going for your physical, but there's nothing, very rarely anything for your mental health. And if we can tap into that market and show that, there's a lot of value in giving your customers a fitness, but then also giving them something that's related to fitness from the mental perspective and improving that and building better habits. That's really, I think, where the exponential growth is going to come from. And then long term, focusing more B2B as health and well-being plans, I think will be very interesting. So it's going to be an exciting year. Lots to do, but super, super excited to see what comes from it.
We always end the pod by manifesting on this very day next year.
Yeah.
Where will you be?
Obviously, still be founder of Social Limits, operating globally, have a few big partnerships with either gyms or more brands, and just having that stable recurring revenue, traveling and understanding the different markets. I think we'll probably still be in Sydney, but also having that flexibility to, maybe spend a month elsewhere or 2 months elsewhere during the year.
Well, Lino, thank you so much for coming on Core and Commerce.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.